we have to be really careful when we're applying governance, because not enough governance results in chaos, right? But too much governance results in chaos that's invisible that we have to go find elsewhere. Music is very, very important. You have to do something that doesn't involve looking at a screen your entire life, right? You've got to walk away from it and do something with your hands and make something beautiful.
Welcome to FinOps in Action. I'm your host, Alon Arvatz. Each week, I'll sit down with FinOps experts to explore the toughest challenges between FinOps and engineering. This show is brought to you by Point5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of FinOps in Action. Today, I'm particularly excited about this episode because our guest today has a very, very diverse background. He was actually a security engineer. He did integrity testing. He was into data center engineering. He built data private cloud environments. He led and created consultancy services. He supported FinOps practitioners from the vendor side. He was a FinOps instructor, and up until recently, he led FinOps at GitLab. I'm happy to welcome Ben de Mora. Ben, how are you doing?
It's good. It's a good Monday morning. Good morning.
It is. And I would like to hear from you. What is the one thing you got wrong when you started your FinOps career?
Straight into it, yeah. What did I get wrong when I started this? I believed that tooling would save us all. I believed that technology was the answer, right? And that all you have to do was get the right kind of dashboard, and suddenly magic would happen. Everybody would do what they needed to do and fix all the problems. It was just a technology problem. And I tried really, really hard for a while to use that approach. Didn't work. Didn't understand why it didn't work, and had to sort of sit back and think about it and go, so what's actually causing the problem? What's causing the problem is not technology. It's people using technology, right? So that's what I got wrong. A lot of effort was burned on believing that technology would be the solution. It's important, but it's not the answer.
And did that change how you perceive the role of FinOps or the skills you need as a FinOps practitioner?
Yeah, I mean, when I started doing it, for me, it was this is another engineering challenge, right? This is another technical challenge. I will solve this. This is fine. I've 20 odd years of doing this other stuff. It's fine. I can figure this out. But actually, that's like 5% of the total picture, right? If that. And actually, most of it is around business. It's around people. It's around enablement and education and support and the right kind of conversations to be happening.
That's awesome. But I know from our previous conversations, Ben, that you also believe that technology can prevent some of the mistakes that people can make.
Yeah, I mean, you can't fix what you can't see, right? And you can't understand it if it's too complex. So even if you can see it, if it hasn't been simplified so that somebody can pass what I call like my 10-second test, right? You look at it, 10 seconds should be able to make sense. If it takes you half a day to figure it out, ain't gonna work. Nobody's gonna use that, right? So the data in its like raw naked form is not workable from the providers in the data file. So you need to get to the point whereby, okay, you've got clear insights and clear data, which prompt action, right? Which trigger people realizing and understanding. But no, you're right. I mean, you can't drive a car if you don't know how to drive, but you can't drive a car if you don't have a car. You know what I mean? So you need the technical solution as well as the knowledge of how to operate it and work with it.
And I would actually love to double click on something you mentioned, and I find very fascinating, like this 10-second rule. This is basically a product management or user experience principle that you as a FinOps person feel like you need to implement. Do you see like FinOps person as a type of product manager or someone that needs to have like user experience skills?
Yeah, definitely. In fact, quite a few people that I know of, or one person in particular based in the UK, I'm thinking of now, they refer to themselves as FinOps product owners or FinOps product managers. FinOps as a product concept, right? I mean, think about it. We have customers, we have users as FinOps practitioners. Our customers are our business, right? And our user experience of FinOps, if you like, is the enablement we give them, the simplification we give them. So yes, FinOps as a thing is a product delivered to the business that needs to improve its efficiency. And if we think about it in that way, then it's very important that we get the whole blend right. We get not just the visibility, but also the full loop back, right? The complete enablement piece so that we can use the visibility to improve the actions and the initial decision conditions. So, yeah.
And did you have the chance to actually do things like a user testing, for example, like building a dashboard, going in front of a few engineers, show them the dashboard, see if the 10-second rule works, and then based on that, build the next dashboard or improve its current dashboard?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's a really important thing, right? Never, ever, ever create visibility and then just send it off into the wild to see what happens, right? Like throw it over the fence. You know what I mean? No, it's got to be a collaborative thing. Like first principle of FinOps is teams need to collaborate, and the FinOps team is the most important collaborator there, right? So when we're building our visibility, we're doing our views and developing our understanding, not just of like where the waste is and where the spend is, but like what led to it. What were the processes that took us there? When we're doing that kind of work, we have to do it in really close collaboration with the end user, the people who are going to be consuming that insight. And then like the next level up beyond that is once they've seen what you can do to build with them and for them, how long does it take them to build their next views? How long does it take once they understand how to, okay, I see this and I want some more knowledge about that area. How do I then get to a point where I can explode that out and see what's under that rock? So that's the next question is like, okay, great. So we understand the first point. How do we get deeper and how quickly can they get to an answer there? Yeah. Because every answer gives you 10 more questions. So that's not scalable in an organization where you have a small FinOps team. They're usually small and overworked, right? We all know that. Where you've got a small FinOps team, okay, if they're the ones making all the dashboards, that's just not scalable, right? So how quickly can other people do that kind of thing?
Wow, that's really fascinating. And I'm telling you, it's the first time I hear about FinOps as a product manager or someone that needs to do product management. And I'm going to completely geek out on that because I come from a product management background and ask you, when you think about product management, one of the key things you want to do is basically track the usage of your users. Now, that is something that really requires some advanced tooling to monitor how and how much people use your solution. But I wonder if you were able to find a solution to actually track the usage of the dashboards or the data you surface to your organization.
Yeah, so there's three ways I've done that in the past. One of them is just login count and duration, right? How often did my engineering team leads or engineers go log into any solution? How long were they logged in for, right? That's often you can get that kind of insight from a lot of third-party solutions. And then the second way is anecdotally just ask them. Have you created any good views? Have you got any good ideas? Have you shared any good insights that you've created with other teams because it might be useful? And looking for that organic sort of expansion of visibility and understanding is the second way. And the third way is how's the business doing, right? How are we actually getting on? Because if we're not looking at the data, we're not operating on our insights, and we're not building on that, chances are we're still wasting money, right? So the three diagnostic sort of pieces I look at are they logging in? Are they sharing stuff and creating stuff, right? And like rate of new insights being created, rate of new visibility insights being created or whatever. And then thirdly, like, are we actually improving? Because if we aren't improving, either no one's looking or what we're looking at isn't helping us, right?
Yeah.
Or a mix of the two.
Absolutely. Listen, Ben, we're almost 10 minutes into the session and I already learned so much. And I want to ask another follow-up question. Obviously, user experience is very important for adoption. I think you mentioned it, but do you feel like it's also important for scale in organizations that have multiple business units or engineering groups?
Yeah, absolutely right. So one of the there's a really cool piece of stuff on the FinOps Foundation website about champions programs. That is the most effective scale out approach, right? Being able to create like a broader community, an esprit de corps of people who know about this stuff, who are enabled, who are empowered. Maybe they've got some further training and education as well, who have the right links and connections in to bidirectionally also sort of help the FinOps team reach out to a wider audience, but also aggregate understandings and feedback from the wider business. If you've got a FinOps team of 3 people and you've got 2,500 engineers, that's a lot of one-to-ones, right? Not many people can cope with that number of one-to-ones. So you need to sort of stage it out and scale it out. But yeah, one of the biggest mistakes I've seen businesses make in terms of scalability is continuing to believe that all the FinOps stuff is done by the FinOps team, like all 2 of them or 3 of them or whatever it is. And straight away you've created a bottleneck and you can't scale from that. So really, there's a term that that Carlo, Wesco, Phil Purcell, and myself sort of started talking about when I was at Aptio, talking about federated FinOps, right? Have you heard that phrase, federated FinOps? It's like, yeah, if you think about a federated model, you have to create a central point of overall sort of oversight and connection, but you really need to create pockets of FinOps practice that are all connected and interlinked as you scale out, right? So, 100,000 people business is not going to manage to do FinOps with 3 people.
Absolutely. And basically, these champions, they are your ambassadors. They're the one who help you inject the principles, the idea into the organization. Do you have some tips on how to identify a potential champion?
Yeah. First of all, make sure they're not all the same background, right? If your whole champion group are like all FP&A folk or all engineers, then those are really the only conversations that are probably going to happen, right? So look in weird places. Look for marketing teams make great champions because they're used to communicating out, right? Your education teams, your finance, but also your procurement. Look in your business for people who have an interest in this space and who like talking to people. Yeah. Your champions are going to have a lot of conversations. So if that stresses people out, it's probably not for them. But yeah, it's really important to find people wherever you want the conversations to happen. So I guess you kind of, if you're building a champions network and champions program, go on a bit of a roadshow, meet people, talk to people. And also there's a page on the foundation website that talks about how to create a champions program. And it works and it's good. I've used it quite a bit, actually.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that from engineers' perspective, I think you need to identify the people that really care about efficiency, like those who cannot sleep at night when they know their code or infrastructure are running inefficient, like they feel it's bad engineering, I need to do something about it. I can tell you that my co-founder Gal is one of those people.
My
Oh
partner
yeah.
is one of those people. She's an amazing software developer, and it's like if it's bad code, it's a problem. You know what I mean?
Exactly. So I think, I would also say that it's very hard to find engineers that really care about saving money purely. I think that looking for these people will make it very, very hard for you to find the relevant person. But if you focus on the person that actually wants to do good engineering and he cares about it, and he can very quickly understand why inefficient infrastructure and architecture is bad engineering, I think this is the person you want in your program.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing that is really emotive and really effective in getting people to be engaged is introducing different metrics. So, for example, sustainability data, right? So CO2e, water consumption, power consumption. whatever data you can get to put side by side, right, is really, really effective. Yeah. As alongside the engineering excellence piece, which is very, very effective, right, as well. But you're gonna cover a lot of different bases if you provide things like efficiency, like scalability, like cloud native capabilities, alongside things like sustainability and other things as well. So there's no one answer that engages. It's a lot of things. One of the most important things, we've not actually touched on this yet, but one of the most important things that gets engineers engaged is executive sponsorship, leadership sponsorship. Because if you think about it, right, one of the top issues that we see being reported in the state of FinOps is getting engineers to take action on FinOps specifically, right? Engineers are taking action all of the time. I've never met an engineering team that isn't 110% capacity planned, right? They're all up to their eyeballs in it. But what they get prioritized on is what matters. And if the business leadership isn't bought into getting FinOps actions to happen, and instead they're saying, I want my new release next week and I want whatever else done instead this week. If the priority is build instead of let's clean ourselves up and make sure that we've got a good, efficient environment, then that's what will happen, right? And actually, if you're pushing a different narrative to the one that the executive is driving, you will lose as a FinOps person because you're not an executive, probably, right? So, yeah, it's really important. I mean, 49% of FinOps practices say that they need executive buy-in that translates to actions happening. As of like last year's state of FinOps. So, yeah, without that, doesn't matter how happy your engineers are to do the work because they've got prioritizations elsewhere.
Absolutely. And we actually came here with a very nice formula on what motivates engineers. And we mentioned seeing inefficiency as bad engineering. We mentioned sustainability, and we mentioned executive buy-in. That's actually a very interesting formula. And I actually want to take you back a bit to the sustainability piece. And I want to get an honest answer from you. Did you see positive results when embedding the sustainability metrics, meaning it actually got engineers more motivated or engineers celebrating their sustainability impact?
Massive, yeah. The difference in feedback that you get when you show someone relative data, when you show somebody any data that shows that they're making a positive impact on the planet, they care. They really care. And a lot more focus is put into doing things. There is a caveat, and which is that sometimes the sustainability improvement metrics and the cost improvement metrics don't go together. They don't actually support each other, right? For example, different regions are priced differently, right? Do you know which ones the cheapest regions are? They're the most polluting regions.
Oh.
So if you go deploy your cloud environment in a cheap region and you save however much money, you might be quadrupling or more your carbon emissions.
Wow.
So sometimes they don't actually tally against each other, and then it becomes a balancing act. Then it becomes a conscious balancing act of where you want to put your focus. But then you can't make that choice if you don't have the clear data to be able to make that choice, right? You're doing it blindly.
That's fascinating. Wow. I've never thought about it.
Another question, how much carbon emissions does a savings plan reduce for you?
0.
Right? Yeah, and actually almost counterproductive, because if you commit to a certain level of usage, right, you're paying for that usage, whether you use it or not, which means if you don't use it, if you overcommit, the cloud provider is probably just going to leave that resource online. I don't know how they operate, right? But they might leave that resource online because it's paid for, at which point, it's harmful. So there's a lot of trade-offs and balancing acts to make in that conversation around sustainability versus cost.
Yeah, but you're saying something very interesting. Commitment is counter sustainability.
It might be, right? It could be, potentially.
If you don't use it to the full extent, would be. Wow, that's amazing. And Ben, listen, before running out of time, there is one big topic that I know you care much about and you have a lot of experience with, and I definitely want to touch, and that's governance.
So we're talking a lot at the moment about the exit point of the production line, aren't we? Right? We're talking about like, do the wheels stay on the car when it comes out the factory, like the exit point? But actually, I mean, why don't we just use that analogy? Yeah, if you do a really, really bad design for a car in the first place, if your schematics are just terrible, then how good's the car ever going to be when it comes out the other end? Even if everything in that factory line goes according to design, if the design sucks, the car's going to be terrible, right? So ultimately, it comes down to what starting conditions are you creating for your cloud engineering, for your overall cloud-based services that you're designing and building. Because if you don't have a clear definition of what good looks like, if you don't have a clear set of policies that define appropriate usage of your resources and good engineering policy and principles, not just in terms of engineering security, we all care about security. We all care about resiliency and capacity and all these other things. But efficiency is often what we call the red-headed stepchild. It's often the one that gets ignored, kind of thing. So if we bake in that as well into the policies, the initial starting point, then that informs all of the architectural decisions all the way down the line. And then hopefully you don't see anywhere near as much waste. You see some improved efficiencies, right? But what is a policy without teeth? What is a policy without governance, without the ability to ensure that it's actually being followed? It's a Christmas list, right? It's an I would like, it's a wish list, right? So policy is worthless without an associated piece of governance. That governance might be some straightforward guidelines of this is how you do this thing, right? Or it could be some hardcore guardrails, right? Your CI/CD pipeline is coded so that if you try to build something that is either over a certain size or doesn't have a labeling or whatever, it just doesn't build, right? So varying levels of sort of draconian measures to be taken to ensure the policies are followed, but ultimately a policy must be governed. And then at the end of that, we must have compliance to validate that the policy governance worked and delivered what we wanted. Because policies are made often in an ivory tower. They're often made in a vacuum with hope, right? Policies are statements of hope. They really are, right? And what we need to see is like when the policy was put into action and followed, did we get what we wanted? Yeah. And I'll say one other thing. I'll say I talk too much about this stuff, but one other thing about policies is that they are static pieces of documentation in a rapidly evolving fluid landscape, right? Which means that a policy that was written in 2018 about cloud is probably really bad now, right? It's probably not a good policy now, right? So what I like to do when I create a policy is put 2 dates on it. I put a review date on it. Like, when do I need to validate that this is actually still worth doing? And I put a sell by date on it, use by date on it, right? When does this gone stale? When do I think this is probably not going to be any good for? Now, that could be a combination of the expected evolution of the cloud services the policy relates to, or it could be the maturity of my business as it moves through, right? Because obviously we might have a situation we start off, we've done a DC exit, we've got loads of VMs, everything's static, it's all EC2 or whatever, right? But actually, that might not be where we want to stay, and we're moving towards a highly cloud-native, serverless, Kubernetes, all that kind of thing. So policies that talk about EC2 are not going to do a lot of good if everything is now in Lambda, right? So what's the sell-by date of my policies? And when do I need to, that's no longer a thing, we'll bin that now, kind of thing. So anyway, like I said, talk too much about that stuff, but these are really important things, because if we don't get that right, or if that doesn't exist, how do we expect our engineers to do good things if we've not told them what good looks like from a value and from an efficiency perspective? They're guessing. So it's important to do that.
Absolutely. And I think that when people talk about governance, sometimes they go very fast to, okay, what guardrails I can put in place that will enforce the policies that we have. But you talk about inform, and you talk about guidelines, and you talk about principles that basically people need to operate accordingly. So sounds from you like governance is not about like putting the right tool in place to enforce things, but actually creating certain policies or statement of hopes, and then find a way to track and make sure it really happens. Is that accurate?
Yeah, so it's a really good point, actually. The more control you apply, the more people will find a way around it, right? We know that's going to be the case. If somebody's like, well, I can't do X, Y, Z because my guardrails don't let me, I'll just do it over here in a different account, and I'll put the company credit card on it because I need this to work, and I'm just going to go do this, right? So we have to be really careful when we're applying governance, because not enough governance results in chaos, right? But too much governance results in chaos that's invisible that we have to go find elsewhere, right? So the happy medium, yeah, and depending on what we're trying to govern and who we're trying to govern, as well as the other important thing, the culture and the organization and the attitude towards this kind of thing. So what we're trying to govern and who we're trying to govern, we need to dial it up and dial it down. Like how much wiggle room do we create, and how much capacity, how much freedom do we allow in the interpretation of this policy that we're creating here? And that's a continually fine-tuned thing, right? And this is why compliance is really important, because if your governance is being sidestepped, or your governance is creating problems, or it just isn't effective, you've got to fix it. A lot of people consider this to be a set it and forget it thing. We do it once, we did all the work, it took ages, we wrote some really boring documentation, and now we're done with that thing. We'll move on, right? But it's a continually living thing, to keep evolving.
And do you always make sure that you have an exception process?
Absolutely, yeah. There always needs to be a break glass thing where there's going to be edge cases that just is, right? And when there is an edge case, there's got to be an easy way to go, right, actually, here's a justification why this policy in this specific instance is actually not helping us, so we need to do X, Y, Z. That might also, the other thing with exceptions is also have sell-by dates and review dates on them, because an exception might be there due to the fact that this rapidly evolving landscape we work in hasn't quite caught up to the demand of that specific thing we want to do, right? But it will. It may well do, right? So maybe we have an exception now, but in 6 months we have to review the exception and say, do we still need this exception? Or is there now a thing that allows us to do what we were trying to do, which is in policy? Or do we need new policy? Because the exception has actually proven that policy is not good.
And Ben, to make things very practical, can you share with us a few policies, high level, a few policies that you implemented and you felt make a big impact?
Definitely, right? Versioning management, storage versioning management, right, is one good one, okay? So at a business that shall not be named, I saw one single GCP bucket, just one bucket, right, with a couple terabytes of storage the stuff being stored in it, that was costing $250,000 a month in old, yeah, right, $4 million a year in old versions being retained on that. Not the data, not the data itself, just the older versions. $330,000 a month.
Wow.
Right? Because somebody had gone, I'll have versioning on this. This data is important. I'll keep every version of it forever. Right? So, I mean, versioning control, I want to keep the last 30 days, or I want to keep the last 50 revisions, or whatever, right? But if you have, the problem with cloud is that unlike the data center, where you hit a point where your storage filer has run out of disk and you have to go buy a new filer, that's a present thing that you will see. In cloud, that doesn't happen. It just keeps going, right? So if you don't have any kind of data management, storage lifecycle management, storage is like a silent killer in cloud because it just keeps on adding. It keeps on adding, especially when you've got versioning or if you've got excessive transit between storage categories, whatever. I saw another situation where somebody was archiving to Glacier on a daily basis, and the money they were saving on the storage moving out of S3 to Glacier was being destroyed by the transit costs of moving to Glacier every day, all the time, right? So it's about, great intent, yeah, but thinking about what you're doing with your storage. So setting up policies that say Glacier's once a month in one go, right? Or things like, we are only going to keep this many versions for this period of time or this number of versions, whichever comes first. That kind of thing, yeah? As an example, there's loads of those, right? You did say high level, they weren't high level, they were specific, but storage life cycling is important. There's your high level one. But other things like non-production workloads, yeah? If you go from 24/7 to 12/5 in your uptime, that is an almost 64% reduction, 63.78, I think, % reduction in usage. Right? It's nearly 2/3 for just turning it off when you go home. Right? Like we're all taught as children, turn the lights off when you leave the room, but we don't carry that with us when we go to cloud. And if your engineers are at the pub on a weekend where they should be, or whatever, and they're out socializing and their dev environments are up running and costing money, why? What are we getting for that money? Right? So, couple of simple policies. And again, exceptions. Sometimes you don't want to turn off the environment outside hours because, have you ever tried to turn off a SAP database and turn it back on again? It takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
Right? Sorry, SAP.
Yeah.
Love you, really.
They'll do well, I'm sure. They'll do well.
I'm sure they will, yeah.
Cool, Ben. That's extremely helpful and honestly mind-blowing. Like I'm still picking up the pieces from my mind being blown away. It's really very practical, very relevant stuff. And Ben, I want to leave, some time to actually learn a bit more about you.
Uh-oh.
The personal level. And today you live in Scotland, right?
Yeah, just outside Glasgow. Yeah, it's beautiful. I've been here about 15 years. It's a lovely country. Shame about the weather. I'm looking out the window right now, and it's not that great. But no, it's a beautiful place. And yeah, come visit.
Yeah, it's absolutely beautiful. And I share with you that I did my post-high school trip to Scotland. It was incredible.
Cool.
How did you end up in Scotland? Because you're not originally from there.
Can you tell? No, no, I'm from Bristol originally, down in the southwest of England. And I was working for Oracle at the time. So I was at Sun Microsystems, which was wonderful. And Sun got bought by Oracle, which was quite a traumatic experience, but as it will be when you get bought as a company, right? But yeah, Oracle bought Sun. And at the time, I was based out of an amazing place in Camberley called Gilmont Park, which was wonderful. It's now a housing estate, Bellway Homes or something. But yeah, Gilmont Park, and there was a big data center there, and they moved the data center. So Oracle moved the data center from that place up to a place in Scotland called Linlithgow, right? And they were closing down that site, and I was kind of looking at this and thinking, well, that's going to be a problem. So I looked at the data center up in Scotland, and I got a couple of work trips up here. Got to know some of the people here, folks like Rob Wainwright, who is at Aptia now, who's wonderful. And I was like, no, I want to come work here. This is awesome. I love this country. This is great. I'm going to move here and work here. So I got a job at the Oracle data center up in Scotland and moved my family up here, and it was great. But that was a while ago. But yeah, that was fun. That began 5 years of me being a data center engineer and principal data center engineer and all that other stuff.
Cool. And you grew up in England, in England, but nonetheless, you're not big into soccer or football, right?
No, I'm a rugby person. Yeah, I very much Harlequins rugby team, great rugby team. They may not win, but they definitely won't bore you on the pitch. sorry, Quins. Yeah, no, rugby for me is more of is my sport. I used to play. I was a right side as a tight head flanker. Yeah, that was me.
Yeah, that's a painful sport. Very painful.
It is. It's brutal. Yeah, it is fun. It's very strategic though. It's very strategic. It's not just violence on the pitch. It's a good sport to play.
Yeah. And then a few words about the guitars behind you that almost distracted me the entire conversation.
Yeah, I'm a musician. I've been a musician since I was about 11. My dad was a musician as well. He played lots of different instruments. I used to have where I used to live. I used to have his banjo on my wall that I inherited when he passed away. But yeah, music is very, very important. You have to do something that doesn't involve looking at a screen your entire life, right? You've got to walk away from it and do something with your hands and make something beautiful. And I also think that they're kind of works of art too, right? Like they're very beautiful things, as well as sounding amazing and being great to play. So it's a good thing to do to just clear your mind, not think about technology or FinOps. I know that's heresy, right? Don't think about FinOps for a few minutes. Do something else. Go for a walk, ride a motorcycle, play guitar, whatever, right?
That's a great advice. And Ben, is there any book you would recommend us to read?
Yeah, so there's a couple of authors, Brian Cox and Jeff Forshaw. They're scientists, and they write some really fascinating books. But what I like about them is that they're very accessible. They're very pedestrian, very easy to read. You do not need to be a physicist to read them. And there's some great books that they put out. So the one that I'm reading at the moment called "Why Does E Equal MC Squared and Why Should We Care?" Fascinating, really, really interesting stuff. So if the way the world works is interesting to you, worth having a read.
Absolutely. By the way, physics was what I wanted to study in university, but then I decided to study something practical, and I went for law and accounting. And 3 years into my studies, I dropped out to found my first startup. So physics has always been my passion.
Believe it or not, so when I went to university to go and do the open day thing and have a look around and choose a degree and all that kind of thing, I went with a view of doing a physics degree.
Oh, wow.
I was going to do a physics degree, right? And I was really interested. And then I went to the computing faculty and I went into the robotics and all that kind of stuff. And I saw like robots driving around the ground, following lines on the floor and like robotic arms and stuff. And I was like, this looks like fun. I'm going to do this. And that's the degree I did instead, was computing for real-time systems, lots of embedded systems design and lots of assembly language code and C programming and all that kind of stuff. So because they let me play with robots, so I did that instead of physics. And now here I am, right? I'm not doing physics.
In FinOps.
In FinOps, yeah. No physics in FinOps. It's all virtual, it's all cloud.
Exactly. Cool. Ben, thank you very much. If people want to reach out to you and ask questions, what is the best way to do that?
LinkedIn. So hit me up on LinkedIn. It's on my phone. It shouldn't be, but it is. And it's terrible. But yeah, send me a message and I'm happy to chat about stuff. And yeah, if you do, there you go. If you do read that book, then give me a shout because it's always a good chat.
For sure.
Fascinating.
Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. And this was fun. Cheers.
It was a lot of fun. And I would like to thank also our audience for listening in through the entire show. I'm sure you enjoyed it just as much as I did. For me, it was mind-blowing. So I'm sure for many of you as well. Ben, thank you again for joining us. This has been another exciting, mind-blowing episode of FinOps in Action. See you next time. That wraps up another episode of FinOps in Action. Thank you for joining. For show notes and more, please visit finopsinaction.com. This show is brought to you by Point 5, empowering teams to optimize cloud costs with deep detection and remediation tools that drive action.